Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and I know this has been a long time coming, but I'm finally going to review the Tier 8 Soviet heavy tank, the IS-3. This Tier 8 Soviet heavy tank has a great power to weight ratio and good ground resistances, making it very agile, getting around more like a medium tank. And the vehicle's great all-round protection can leave uneducated enemies feeling completely helpless on the battlefield, allowing you to ricochet shell after shell, survive, and finish off tanks. Or maybe you just want to embrace the inner crazy Russian and laugh maniacally again, again, and again. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, stick around. I've got some Ace Tanker gameplay coming right up after I give you a full rundown of the statistics of this vehicle, and if you have no interest in playing the most popular heavy tank in the game, then I'll show you how to take them out effectively on the battlefield. So firstly, let's compare the IS-3 to the Tier 8 American T-32, the Tier 8 German Tiger II, and also its premium counterpart, the IS-3A. So let's talk about the firepower of the IS-3, and that comes from its 122mm main armament BL9 gun. Now this thing packs a punch. It has got 390 alpha damage, that we see is way higher than the T-32 and the Tiger II, and it also has rather nice penetration as well with its standard rounds, 225, way better than the T-32's abysmal 198mm of penetration, and on par with the Tiger II's penetration of its 105mm. Unfortunately, the rate of fire of this 122mm is rather low at 4.5 rounds a minute. That's way worse than the T-32 at 5.66 and the Tiger II at 5.77, which means that the DPM of this tank, the damage per minute, is significantly lower than the American and the German tanks, and it's way behind the premium counterpart, which is unusual, which has got 2000 DPM and fires 0.6 rounds a minute more than the standard IS-3. So how about the weapon handling of the IS-3? Well, it's pretty horrific. 3.4 seconds aim time, 0.4 accuracy. That is far from impressive. Vastly worse aim time than the T-32 and the Tiger II, and only slightly better accuracy than the horrific 0.41 of the T-32's 105mm, and way worse than the Tiger II's best-in-class accuracy of 0.31. The vehicle also gets fairly bad dispersion while moving the tank of 0.21, which is comparable to the T-32, but worse than the Tiger II. But the turret traverse dispersion is a completely different story at 0.08. That is fantastic, way better than the T-32 and the Tiger II, and half of that of the IS-3A. Unfortunately, as with many Soviet tanks, the vehicle also gets rather limited gun depression of 5 degrees, but its elevation is actually amazing at 23 degrees, meaning that you're easily going to be able to shoot at opponents that are above you, even at very steep angles. Now on to the mobility of the IS-3, and it's certainly one of the best aspects of the tank. Its top speed limit is 38 kilometers an hour going forwards, 15 going back, giving it an advantage over the T-32, and able to easily keep up with the Tiger II. And while its engine power doesn't look impressive at 700 horsepower, this is quite a light heavy tank weighing less than 50 tons, giving it a great power to weight ratio of 14.3. Better than the T-32 and way better than the Tiger II, which is also one of the key advantages over its premium variant, the IS-3A, which has a horrific power to weight ratio, and you really don't get anywhere quickly in that tank. As if this power to weight ratio wasn't enough over the T-32 and the Tiger II, it also gets some rather nice ground resistances, 0.1 on hard, 1.4 on medium, and 2.1 on soft. That's way better than the T-32 and the Tiger II on all terrains apart from medium when we compare it to the Tiger II. So this basically means that the IS-3 is quite a nippy mobile heavy tank, which certainly comes in handy getting where you need to get to on the battlefield. The vehicle's turret traverses are rather standard 26 degrees a second in between the T-32 and the Tiger II here, but the tank traverse is rather nice at 30 degrees, giving it a slight edge on the T-32 and the Tiger II. And when we also take into account the power to weight ratio and the ground resistances, this thing is going to be way more mobile, at least with regards to its mobility, than the T-32 and the Tiger II. So how about the armor of this fairly nippy Tier 8 Soviet heavy tank? Well, it's got 110 at the front, 90 at the side, and 60 at the rear, and 249 on the front of the turret, 172 on the side of the turret, and 100 at the rear of the turret. But the key strength of the IS-3, and one of the reasons why it has pretty horrific gun depression, is that it's actually quite a low-profile tank. Here is the profile of the German heavy tank, the Tiger II. The American heavy tank, the T-32, that we can see is quite a lot shorter than the Tiger II. But look at the step down when we look at the IS-3. Just look at it. It's like going down steps. This is such a low-profile tank, which gives its armor the advantage of being very well angled. And so this means that while the frontal armor of the IS-3 might not be as thick as the T-32 and the Tiger II, the angling is very impressive. In fact, when the IS-3 doesn't angle his tank at all from the front, we can see that all of it is 190 millimeters of effective protection. And there are even a couple of parts of the frontal armor here which are 20 millimeters thicker, and that's because there are actually slabs of tracks on the front of the tank, which I thoroughly recommend that you avoid shooting if you're engaging one of these frontally, that boost the effectiveness of that armor up to about 225 to 230 millimeters. Now, because all the Soviet tanks are designed with this kind of beak at the front, that means that as soon as you turn the IS-3 to the side, you actually make that front plate rather weak. So if you see an IS-3 angling his tank like this, don't be afraid to shoot the front plate here rather than shooting the lower plate. You would actually be making a big mistake to shoot the lower plate from this angle. You need 215 millimeters of penetration to get through it, whereas you only need 170 to be able to get through the front of this tank. And even if you shoot the track, which has got 130 millimeters of armor rather than 110, you still need 10 to 15 millimeters less penetration to be able to engage it. One of the best things about the IS-3, however, is the lovely spaced armor and angling of the armor underneath that we can see here. The side of the IS-3 kind of has a wing that comes up on the upper half of the armor, which makes it very effective indeed. Even when the IS-3 is angling as shallowly as this, we can see it's 270 millimeters of protection on the upper part. Firstly, you have to get through 30 millimeters of spaced armor, and then behind that is a 90 millimeter plate that is so well angled that unless you've literally got it right on the side, it is going to be an auto ricochet. And even with the side of the tank like this, you still need 190 millimeters of penetration to go through the side of an IS-3 when it's not angling at all. And so this means if you're shooting the side of an IS-3, you definitely don't want to shoot the spaced armor lip up here. You want to shoot underneath, through the tracks on the side, and just shoot anywhere on the tracks. Just make sure you don't shoot the side armor on this vehicle. To give you an idea what that visually looks like, you want to try and shoot the gap between the tracks and the upper hull if you can, or just skip the tracks altogether. But as soon as you aim at this spaced armor lip up here, you need to have extra high penetration to be able to go through and be not angling at all. And as soon as it's angling like this, you're going to ricochet. And this is certainly one of the key strengths of the IS-3, that an inexperienced player will quite often shoot at this part of the tank and it will just magically absorb, or alternatively they're going to go for the lower plate. And what they just don't realize is that the key is to shoot the front here that's angled towards you. So what about the turret armor on the IS-3? Well, we can see it's about 300 millimeters of effective protection all across the front of the tank, and the angling up the top just starts to get to ridiculous effective armor levels. If you're engaging the side of the turret, it's still relatively thick at the front, and you're going to need about 175 millimeters of penetration to have a 50-50 chance to go through the side of it. However, the IS-3's top turret does have one significant weakness, and that is this front plate on the top here. It is only 20 millimeters of effective armor, and so this means that all guns higher than 60 millimeter in caliber are able to overmatch this part of the roof. And so if an IS-3 is hull down against you and you can't see this part of the armor, just shoot the top of the tank here. And to give you a visual idea of what that part of the turret is, it's this plate here. So if you can see it at all, just take a shot at it and you can easily penetrate the IS-3. Apart from that, the vehicle has a standard 1,500 hit points, not quite as much as the T-32 and the Tiger II, but certainly not terrible. One thing that is terrible about the tank, however, is the view range. 350 meters view range is absolutely atrocious, and so if you can engage these vehicles at mid to long ranges, they're quite often as blind as a bat and they're not going to be able to see you. And so consequently that means that if you're playing in the IS-3, you should try to avoid big open areas and instead try to gravitate towards those corner fights where your view range won't matter and you're still going to be able to engage effectively with your opponents using the other fantastic statistics of this vehicle. So what kind of equipment do I recommend for your IS-3? Well, number one, definitely take a large caliber tank gun rammer because you want to have that extra 10% rate of fire. Number two, you must take a vertical stabilizer Mark II because of the 20% improvement to your gun handling while moving, which helps to mitigate that awful 3.4 seconds aim time of this 122mm main armament. The next slot, I guess, is up for debate. Personally, I like to take improved ventilation class 3 to make my tank just a little bit better all round, but there is an argument to, for example, either take coated optics or binoculars to improve your abysmal view range, and some people would even prefer to use an enhanced gun lane drive to further improve the aim time of this tank. So what about crew skills? Well, of course, as with all of your heavy tanks at high tier, you want to take repairs first. On your commander, after you've got 100% repairs, you want to be taking 6 cents, but remember it's a perk and it needs to be at 100% before it will start to function, so you're likely to have to retrain. Next, you want to take Brothers in Arms once you've reached your 3rd skill, so you can have both 6 cents and Brothers in Arms, which increase your overall crew skills by 5%, which is awesome. And then on the commander, I like to take Situational Awareness after that to improve the view range by up to 3% when you reach 100% skill. It's the same story on your gunner. I like to focus on things like Snapshot to decrease the dispersion when you turn the turret, and then it's kind of up to you whether you want to be taking camo or taking armor on this tank. I personally like to take a fire extinguisher, but if you want to drop that out to be using extra combat rations, then you might want to take firefighting instead. For my driver, I like to take off-road driving and clutch braking. I personally find that more useful than having smooth ride and preventative maintenance on this tank. And on your loader, your number one priority is to get safe stowage so you don't get ammo racked quite as much. And then you probably want to be taking camouflage on this tank because the actual camo rating of the IS-3 isn't all that bad because it's so low profile. And when we compare it to the other tier 8 heavies, for example the Tiger II or alternatively the T-32, we can see just how much more sneaky that low profile Soviet tank is. But you know what, I think that's quite enough theory crafting. Let's get stuck into some gameplay. So here we go, we're playing on Karelia Standard Battle, and this is a fairly averagey kind of matchup for the IS-3. 3 tier 9 tanks on the enemy team, a whole wealth of tier 8 vehicles, and then some tier 7 light tanks and a tier 6 light tank propping it up at the bottom. Now this vehicle with, as I mentioned, about 190mm of effective armor, even if you don't angle the tank at all, is very, very efficient at chewing up tier 6 tanks, tier 7 tanks. You can pretty much just You just feast on them, really. Even if those tier 6s and tier 7s are loading premium rounds, they're usually unable to be able to get through the frontal armor of this tank, and your big meaty 122mm is certainly going to rip them apart very quickly with 390 alpha damage. But that's not the kind of replay I'm going to be showing here. Effectively, all of the enemy tanks do have a fairly good chance of getting through the frontal armor of this tank if I don't use it effectively. And they also all have a chance at least to be able to engage me in fair combat, so let's take a look to see how this one goes. Now I'm pushing down the valley aggressively on Karelia. I want to get to the front because I felt like our medium tanks needed a little bit of support, and I just think this location is so important. Now, one of the important things we did there is we kept our frontal turret armor to the T-34 that we knew we were going to take a shot from, and as we can see, it bounces off the front of our turret. He was unable to hit the side armor of this tank, but you know what, even if he hit the side armor, remember there's still pretty much a 50-50 if he hits the upper part of it, that we're going to be able to absorb it with the lovely angled side wing, so to say, coming out here and coming out here on this vehicle. Now my artillery senses were tingling there, and luckily we pull back before the Crusader SP on the enemy team manages to put a shot into us. And we're against a rather dangerous tier 9 Czechoslovakian auto-loading medium tank here. You really don't want to stand in line and take too many hits from, I think it's a 100mm gun on that tank, right? Or is it 105mm that does 320 alpha damage with every shot? So I immediately repair my tracks. He gets his first shot in. Luckily the artillery misses us. But when you're on a bit of a downslope here, you are very much more protected from artillery than you are when you start to get around here. This is like the danger area for artillery. But when they're actually firing at you with this little lip here, it's quite tricky for them to be able to land a shell flush on you. That's definitely something to take into account, that when you're spotted, you don't want to be in this kind of area here. And that's why I waited until I'm not spotted any longer to hopefully be able to go and start to apply some pressure. But again, I'm still rather concerned, and I don't know what in hell's name that AMX CDC was thinking there, but he just got his head blown clean off by the Jagdtiger. And I think right now it's very important that I hold this location, because as soon as I lose this location, then the Skoda is going to rip apart these 2 tier 8 American heavy tanks here. And so my job right now is just to play a defensive role, stop the Skoda from dominating my heavies, and start to work some funky shots. Now, side scraping with the IS-3 is actually very, very, very effective when you do it in reverse. Reverse side scraping in the IS-3 is something that you learn to do when you play a lot of these tanks on Himmelsdorf, on Runeberg, especially when you're playing the strongholds. That's because of the side wing, remember, that I was talking about. If they hit the whole of this part of your tank, it's just going to do nothing. And you've even still got the 20mm of spaced armor of your tracks covering the 90mm of the lower hull armor that this tank has to also be able to ricochet. Now I feel like I've got some opportunities to do what I was preventing the Skoda from doing, i.e. pushing forwards and shooting into the vulnerable heavies down below. By pulling back as quickly as I can, the Skoda just doesn't feel like he wants to come around the corner at the IS-3 that's likely to be reloaded. The enemy tanks are shooting me from the other side of the valley, and again I pull back into a position where I just want to be defensive right now. Artillery misses me, I'm quite happy about that, and now I turn my attention to this IS-3 down below, who seems to have turned his turret away from me, so I can pop out round the corner very slowly and be able to engage him, and now turn my attention to possibly having to handle the Skoda above me, but luckily he doesn't come for me. Going round the corners slowly in your IS-3 is definitely one of the most important things to do. You want to get control of your R key, because if you go round the corner slowly, that means that the pretty horrific 3.4 seconds aim time on the IS-3 doesn't matter too much. Now the T-34 comes around the corner and he ricochets pretty much off the back of my tank, I believe, there. And we shut him down, punishing him for his aggressive play, but we're under some serious pressure here. That was some nice angling work against the T-34, and now the enemies really want to try and progress to shut me down. But remember, they are in the vulnerable location right now. We've got all of my friends on the north part of this map engaging them in the side, hopefully some artillery support, and this is what the IS-3 needs to do. This is IS-3 101. This is the IS-3 low profile, work your even minute ridge lines, force your enemies into awkward situations, micromanage being engaged by so many tanks, the IS-3 shooting me in the back that I didn't give him my arse, put a round through the side of the VK's turret, turn my attention to the Skoda, and this AMX 1375 just isn't going to be doing very much against us. Now, I've been counting the shells of the Skoda T50, and I know that he only has one left unless he's reloading for the next 25 seconds. And this is what you can just do. I'm just letting that tier 7 light tank just shoot me. That's his final shell. Now I've got him. Good night, tier 9 medium tank, and then I can turn around to deal with the tier 7 French little light tank autoloader going for me. And this little situation here for the IS-3 was just simply beautiful. And it really was IS-3 101, if I might be so bold to say so myself. Just keep your armor, which is very compact, in position. Try and minimize the amount of angles that your opponents can shoot you with. And we miss a shell on the IS-3 there. That was rather unfortunate, but not enough quite gun depression to be able to get him. And just try and survive. Give yourself enough time to reload the 122mm, and if you do that enough times, then you will be able to hold flanks, you will be able to take down higher tiered opponents and equal tiered opponents, and just come out on top. And can you believe that we've still got 911 hit points here left? Now we finally get to see a bit of the mobility of the IS-3, and you might be shocked to see just how quick it is able to get around. Look at this horrific aim time though. And that is with very good crew skills. Obviously the vertical stabilizers that I was talking about. I've got vents on this tank as well that will help it out a little bit there. Oh, sorry about that, AMX 1390. I think I was having a little look to see where all the shells were ricocheting off on the IS-3. We're pushing our way forwards. We want to try and get underneath this gun line here. It's so important when you're rushing to... If I stopped and aimed at this Walker Bulldog right now, I would be a complete idiot. And for some reason, I seem to have stopped to try and take a chance at him. Although I think I realized my mistake quickly. I want to get underneath the gun line. That's one of the most important things I can do right now. Because it's very likely that those tier 9 tank destroyers, or at least one of the tier 9 tank destroyers, is sitting up here. And so, for example, if he was in this location, if I stop here on this lip and engage him, then he can get a free shot into me. Luckily, however, we now know where the Object 704 is, and that is certainly a tank that you don't want to get shot by, pretty much in any vehicle in the game, but especially in your IS-3. As soon as the tanks start to have 270mm of penetration, like the Object 704 does, then you're going to be in a hell of a lot of trouble if they do hit you, and your armor really isn't going to be able to handle it. But we put a good round there into the Bulldog, and then fall back to try and avoid the artillery fire. And I don't know, a lot of the positioning that I've been working in this replay has been to avoid artillery. Wait until you're no longer spotted and try and make your pushes and advances while you're not spotted. The Bulldog wants to make his way down, don't quite have enough gun depression to engage him. Will he get the back of the Jagdpanther 2? This Jagdpanther 2 is in a hell of a lot of trouble now. Well, no he's not, because I've got his back. That Bulldog would have probably been able to kill the entirety of that Jagdpanther if he had tracked him there and engaged him. But we handled that, helped the Jagdpanther 2 out, and now we get to progress to take out the Object 704. Now on 4,663 damage, 4 kills. This has been a fantastic round for the IS-3, but let's see if we can get the icing on the cake at the end of the game. One thing I'd also like to highlight is that I don't think I fired any APCR rounds this game. I'm pretty sure this is my standard loadout, 7 APCR rounds that we haven't had to dip into yet. But when I'm shooting at an Object 704, I probably should be dipping into those APCR rounds. Going from 225 up to the 265 millimeters of penetration on this tank certainly does help when you're trying to get through the front of very heavily armored tanks such as the Object 704. Will we be able to penetrate him on the upper plate? Yes, we will. 808 damage done. Hopefully you guys are getting an idea of just how meaty these 390 alpha damage, 122 millimeter caliber shells are. They certainly do pick apart your opponents rather quickly. If you trade effectively, that is, because remember the rate of fire on this tank is rather atrocious and its DPM is rather lackluster. So while you're not going to be picking apart anything very quickly in an all-in fight, shall we say, when you do trade effectively around the corners, that is definitely one of your keys to victory in the Tier 8 Soviet heavy tank. So what a result for the IS-3, showing you that this tank can perform even when under pressure of multiple enemy vehicles. This was actually my first mark of excellence in this tank, but I hardly ever play this vehicle in the random queue because frankly I have overplayed it over the years, especially in Tier 8 strongholds. However, this was an ace tanker for the IS-3, 1,679 base experience points. Boy, what an ace tanker that was. And we also get a lonely high caliber medal for the 5,471 damage that we dealt and the 4 kills that we achieved. So our marksmanship was perfect in this game, as you would expect at the short to mid ranges that the IS-3 was engaging here. 16 shots fired, 16 hits and 15 penetrations. And trust me, it would have been a completely different story if we were engaging our opponents at 300 to 400 meters where that 0.4 accuracy really does feel rather mediocre. And we also made a cracking profit in this game because we didn't fire any premium ammunition, making 60,000 credits profit. And wow, that was a triple, a 10,000 experience triple. What a result in the IS-3. With only 2 out of 12 shells that actually managed to hit my tank, managing to penetrate it. But hopefully I've showed all of you exactly where you need to be shooting the IS-3 to be able to not allow this to happen to you. And so I guess there's no doubt why the IS-3 is the most popular heavy tank in the game. It's a combination of its low profile armor, reliable gun which doesn't really need to fire APCR, high alpha damage that trades well, and intricate armor effects that a lot of players just don't bother to learn that allows it to dominate the battlefield, or should we say just allow it to be so comfortably played on the battlefield. It really is a pleasure to play this tank, and you feel like you've always got a chance against an opponent, or that you've always got a chance to bounce an opponent, shall we say. And it's these aspects that make the IS-3 my most recommended tank to get, at least for Tier 8, especially for new players. And so hopefully you enjoyed this video and it was useful for you. If it was, please consider giving it a like, it really helps the channel out. And click through up here or use that more info icon in the top right hand corner of your screen to see a wealth of other awesome IS-3 replays on this channel. And let me know in the comments down below, what is your most recommended tech tree for a new player to go for in World of Tanks and why? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic and hopefully I'll see you soon.